We'll move to question time. Senator Cash.
Thank you very much. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. On page 52 of the government's regulatory impact statement for their Industrial Relations Bill, when trying to work out the bargaining cost for medium businesses, the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations calculates that $273,700 divided by 15.2 is $12,878. Can you please confirm that the correct figure should be $18,006?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Well, I knew if I waited long enough, the Shadow Minister for Industrial Relations would be allowed to ask a question about industrial relations.
Senator Watt, please resume your seat. Order on my left. Order on my left. Senator Watt, please continue.
Thank you. It is always good to have a question about industrial relations from the Minister whose office leaked a police raid on union officers who presided over conflict in the industrial relations system and wants to drag us back into that conflict situation. It's always good to get a question about IR from the whiteboard warrior over there, Senator Cash. And you'll be shocked to hear—
Resume your seat. Order on my left. Senator Watt, I will direct you to Senator Cash's question, please. Senator Watt, please continue.
Thank you. So, Senator Cash, always good to hear from you, but the one thing I can guarantee is that when Senator Cash opens her mouth about industrial relations, you can guarantee it's going to be a scare campaign based on lies. And yet again, she's doing it again. The actual facts here—
Please resume your seat. Senator Cash.
Relevance, President, you have already directed the Minister to my question. I would ask that you again draw his attention to the question.
And I will indeed direct the Minister to your question. Thank you, Senator Watt.
Thank you, President. And in fact, I was directly answering Senator Cash's question by referring to the fact that yet again she was coming out with a scare campaign based on lies.
Senator Watt.
That was the question.
Senator Watt. Please resume your seat. Just a moment, Senator Birmingham. If I direct the Minister back to the question, I would expect those that are asking the question to at least be quiet so we can all hear the answer. Senator Birmingham.
President, indeed it was your two directions, which I welcome, to the Minister back to the question. And each time he has flouted that by continuing with the theme of simply reflecting upon the opposition rather than dealing with the very specific, relevant detail of the question.
Thank you, Senator Birmingham. I had just directed the Minister back to the question, and there was so much noise on my left, I couldn't even tell you what the Minister said, and he had just risen to his feet. He's well aware that I've directed him twice, and if we can have quiet, we might all be able to hear the answer. Senator Watt.
As opposed to what Senator Cash is saying, the facts here are that small businesses will be excluded from the single interest stream, so will not be forced to bargain. Small businesses—
Senator Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Watt. Minister.
Thank you. I'm happy to go. Thank you very much, President. The question again, relevance. The bargaining cost for medium businesses. You clearly don't even know what a small, medium
Senator
or
Cash.
large
That's a debating point. It's not a point of order. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Small businesses will have access to— businesses will have access to the cooperative workplaces stream. This point comes across from— well,
Senator Watt,
you really don't want answers, do you?
When you've quite finished on your left, you have one of your own senators on her feet. Senator McKenzie.
Thank you, Madam President. On relevancy, maybe the Shadow Minister could table the regulatory impact statement to assist
Senator McKenzie, that is
the
not a
Minister
debating point.
Please
resume your seat. Senator Watt.
Thank you, President. Small businesses will have access to the cooperative workplaces stream, which is designed to be a low-cost option for businesses without a dedicated human resources capacity. We've seen over the last 24 hours Senator Cash hyperventilating about information in this RIS.
Senator Watt. I'm going to ask you to withdraw that.
OK, I'll withdraw hyperventilating. We've seen Senator Cash going on and on and on, as she is prone to do, about information contained in a RIS and trying to argue that this shows that small businesses will be subject to a major cost, when in actual fact most of them will have access to Cooperative Workplaces Stream, which is a low-cost option that most of them will take advantage of. It's more misrepresentation and scare campaigns from an opposition.
Your time has expired. Senator Cash, first supplementary.
Thank you very much. Can you also confirm that as a result of the mistake, in other words, the RIS is wrong, the total bargaining cost for medium businesses is actually much higher, at over $80,000 and not the $75,148, according to your own government's formula?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Again, what we continually see from Senator Cash and her colleagues in the coalition is a misrepresentation of how the bargaining system will work under the government.
Minister Watt, please resume your seat. Order. You've barely asked the question. I've called the minister to his feet and there's so much noise, I'm having trouble hearing him. Please continue, Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. As I was saying, we continually see Senator Cash and her colleagues seize on facts and figures and then distort what they actually mean. The reality under the government's the reality is that under the government's proposal, most small businesses, and I know you're asking about medium-sized businesses, most small businesses will have access to the Cooperative Workplaces Stream, and there are various other routes for medium-sized businesses to take advantage of that will not include the kind of costs that the opposition is out there trying to scare people about. All through this debate, we have seen scare campaign after scare campaign from the opposition. First of all, it was going to ruin the mining industry, and then everyone realised that it wasn't going to apply to most of the mining industry. Then it was going to promote strikes, and in actual fact there's restrictions on strikes. Everything we've heard from the coalition is a scare campaign and blatantly wrong.
Thank you, Minister Watt. Senator Cash, second supplementary.
Thank you. Is the figure of $12,878 as the bargaining cost for medium businesses as set out in the government's regulatory impact statement right or wrong?
Thank you, Senator Cash. Minister.
Thank you, President. Of course I can only go off the figures that are in the RIS. That is what they're for. But the point is that every step of this debate, we have seen people from the coalition seize on figures and then misrepresent what they actually stand for. Everything we have heard from the coalition has been a misrepresentation of what the government is proposing to do through this multi-employer bargaining and the various other changes.
Please resume your seat, Senator.
It's not.
Senator Watt, that's not helpful. I am asking those on my left to allow the minister to answer in silence. Senator Cash, I've just drawn your attention to the noise in the chamber. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thank you, President. As I say, everything we hear from the opposition in this debate is a misrepresentation and a scare campaign. And the reason for that is that they will stop at absolutely nothing to stop wages from growing. A 10-year government that kept wages deliberately low, that kept productivity low and is fighting to the death to stop changes being made to our industrial relations system that will actually deliver better wages for workers and better productivity for businesses. That's what this is really about, is that the coalition wants to keep the old system in place that kept wages low and kept productivity low.
Minister Watt, your time has expired. Senator Payman.
My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Gallagher. Can the Minister outline how the Albanese government is supporting Australian households during these challenging economic times?
Minister.
Thank you very much, and I thank Senator Payman for the question. Senator Payman is right. In these challenging times, what Australians needed from their government was a budget that was responsible, that was right for the times and which readied us for the future. The primary focus on the budget, aside from delivering on our commitments to the Australian people, was managing the inflationary pressures that Australians are experiencing right now. That's why at the heart of the budget was our 5-point plan for cost of living relief, to provide some support which delivers an economic dividend but doesn't put extra pressure on inflation. The hard reality is that after nearly a decade of division, denial and delay, our economy wasn't as strong or resilient as we need it to be for the challenges we face. But our budget begins to turn that around by investing in the capabilities of our people and the capacity of the economy. Fee-free TAFE and more university places, the National Reconstruction Fund for new, well-paid jobs in new industries, investing in cleaner, cheaper, more reliable energy to deal with the extraordinary energy market mess that we inherited, and budget that pays for things that Australians value the most: better healthcare, better Medicare and better aged care. Above all, the budget marked the end of a wasted decade, a decade where we've seen energy chaos, an aged care crisis, a skills shortage, stagnant wages, $1 trillion of debt with nothing to show for it. That's the mess that we inherited, the mess we're cleaning up in this budget with those key measures which will go to investing in the economic or the productive side of our economy by training people with the skills they need for the future, creating opportunity, supporting new industries where they need an extra hand, and getting the transformation to a decarbonised economy on the right foot.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Payman, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. Can the Minister outline how the budget will ease cost of living pressures for households?
Minister.
Thank you, President. We are easing the cost of living pressure on households by investing in cheaper childcare for more than 1.2 million families. Important legislation that passed this chamber yesterday and has also been dealt with in the House this morning, helping more people, overwhelmingly women, back into the workforce if they choose to, and enough to increase the number of full-time workers by 37,000 extra full-time workers, by expanding paid parental leave to 26 weeks by 2026, by making medicines cheaper, the biggest cut to the cost of medicines in the 75-year history of the PBS, by our investments in more affordable housing, tens of thousands of new social and affordable homes, more support for people to buy their own home, a new national housing accord bringing governments and the private sector together to build the homes we desperately need. Again, after a decade of neglect, the Commonwealth is back at the table on housing, wanting to work in partnership with state and territory colleagues and private providers to deliver the housing options that Australians need.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Payman, second supplementary.
Can the Minister outline why it's important that the government provide support that is responsible and does not put additional pressure on inflation?
Minister.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Payman for the supplementary. The budget was carefully calibrated to deal with the inflation challenge in our economy. We knew we had to act differently from our predecessors to avoid making the inflation problem in our economy worse and forcing the RBA to go even harder on interest rates. The October budget returned $114 billion of tax upgrades to the budget over the forward estimates. This is the government making a decision to return 99% of the upward tax revisions for the next 2 years when the inflation challenge is most severe, and 92% over the forward estimates. This compares to the Howard Costello government's average of around 30% of the tax upgrades and the former government's average of around 40%. It was an important decision that we made. Treasury has analysed the economic impact of the overall revenue upgrades in the October budget instead of being transferred to households rather than returned to the budget, and that would have put significant pressure on inflation.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McGrath.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. The regulatory impact statement of the government's industrial relations legislation says the department has costed bargaining consultants by using an article entitled "How much should I charge as a consultant in Australia?" from a website called authentic.com.au. The author of that article is described on that website as a cross between business strategist, modern-day spiritual healer and self-development expert. Benjamin J. Harvey is as comfortable working with shamans to strategists, psychics to sales reps, healers to homemakers, Buddhists to businessmen, mediators to mediators. Do you think that's an acceptable way to calculate such costings?
I'm not going to call the minister until there's silence. And I expect senators to listen in silence. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. I am aware of this. Incident, and I also am aware that a departmental spokesperson from the department has already addressed this point by saying that the link was used as part of an internal desktop review, which used a range of online sources to determine an indicative cost as part of the RIS. This included websites such as the AFR. Do you have an issue with that one? It included PayScale. Do you have an issue with that one? It included Talentcom and LinkedIn. Do you have issues with those as well? And the departmental spokesperson has gone on to say that it was incorrect to use the link as being the only source referenced in that section of the RIS. The department apologises.
Would you resume your seat, please? Order, Senator Cash and Senator Canavan, when I'm calling the Senate to order. Minister, please continue.
Thank you, President. I didn't know the opposition objected to the AFR and LinkedIn and Talent.com and PayScale and things like that, but apparently they do. Because the truth here is that the opposition, what they really object to is any change to an industrial relations system that has kept wages low, kept productivity low and impeded economic growth. That's
Please resume your seat. Order. Please continue, Minister.
Thank you. There is nothing that gets the coalition more excited than keeping wages low.
Please resume your seat. Seriously, Senator Cash, I've just called the chamber to order, and the very minute the senator gets back on his feet to answer the question, you interject very loudly once again. I will ask you to listen in quiet. Please continue, Minister Watt.
Thank you. As I say, there is nothing that gets the coalition going more than the prospect of keeping wages low. That's what they did for 10 years they were in government, and that's what they're determined to do, even though they lost the last election, even when our government got a mandate to get wages moving again. This mob over here are so determined to hold workers back from getting a pay rise that they will continually oppose it. They will come up with scare campaign after scare campaign, anything at all to keep wages low. And why? Because it was a deliberate feature of their economic policy, and they're determined to pursue that in opposition, just as they did it for 10 years in government. You know what will actually make our economy stronger, and that is higher wages and higher productivity. And you know how we're going to do that? By delivering these industrial relations reforms that the people of Australia voted for and this mob still haven't woken up to, and they're pursuing the old fights and the old conflict to hold wages low.
Thank you, Minister. Senator McGrath, first supplementary.
Thank you. The same regulatory impact statement on page 46 references an article entitled "How much do payroll services cost?" on a website called bark.com, which lists its most popular services as dog and pet grooming, dog training, dog walking, life coaching, limousine hire, magicians and private investigators. Is this an acceptable source for a government department to use to calculate bargaining costs for businesses?
Thank you, Senator McGrath. When there is silence, I will call the Minister.
Thank you, President. As I was saying in my previous answer, the departmental spokesperson has acknowledged that it was incorrect to use the link as being the only source referenced in that section of the RIS. However, as I've already said, the work that the department did also included the AFR, PayScale, Talent.com and LinkedIn, and frankly, it probably would have been more wise of the department to reference those ones rather than the...
Senator McGrath, you've asked your question. I would expect you to listen in silence, along with Senator Cash and Senator Birmingham. Please continue, Minister.
So I've got a shorter version of that.
Please continue, Minister.
Thank you. Thank you, President. So, as I say, I frankly think it would have been a better idea for the department to use some of those other more reputable sources on its website rather than the one that they chose to do. They've apologised for their error, but that doesn't deny the fact that in doing this work they relied on a number of other reputable sources, unless if we're learning today that the opposition also has a problem with the AFR, LinkedIn and the other various sites that I used. But, as I say, we're going to hear this all week. We're going to hear attack after attack from the coalition on wage rises, despite the fact that the Australian people voted for them. Frankly, I think it'd be a...
Thank you, Minister. Senator Birmingham.
Senator Watt keeps misleading the chamber with his reference to what the Australian people voted for.
Senator
the bill
Birmingham,
he's talking about, the people didn't...
Senator Birmingham, please resume your seat. Order. 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 When order. Senator Birmingham, that is not a point of order. Senator Wong.
I would ask you to not allow the leader to continue to debate a point when there is no point of order. He knows, and I know he wants to throw some meat to the backbench on an ideological issue, but he knows that is not a point of order.
Thank you, Senator Wong.
You ought to sit him down, President. My submission is you ought to sit him down earlier.
Order. Senator Wong, I would have sat Senator Birmingham down, but there was so much disorder in the chamber he could not hear me. I would once again ask all senators to refrain from shouting out. It's not a football match, it is the Senate chamber, where a little bit of rowdiness is fine, but not the pitch at which it is currently being delivered. Minister, please continue.
Thank you, President. I know it hurts the opposition to realise that the Australian people voted for wages to get moving
Senator
again,
Watt,
but they did, and we're doing it.
Senator McGrath, second supplementary.
Why won't the minister take responsibility for the mistakes in this so-called mistakes in the RIS document instead of blaming junior department officials? Take responsibility.
Order.
Shame on you.
Order. Order. Senator McGrath. Order. 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 Senator Wong. Order. Senator McGrath, I would ask you to be silent. You've asked your question. Senator Cash, I would ask you to be silent, and Senator Wong, I will ask you to be silent as well. Order, Senator McGrath. I've just directed you to be quiet. Minister Watt.
President, as I was saying in my earlier answers, a departmental spokesperson has taken responsibility for that error and—
Senator Watt, please resume your seat. Order on my left. Senator McKenzie. Order. 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 Senator McKenzie, I'm asking you to be quiet as well. Minister Watt.
So, in addition to the department taking responsibility, I have taken responsibility as the minister responsible by saying, frankly, I think that was the wrong thing to do. But isn't it ironic that the party of no hoses is here lecturing us about taking responsibility? We endured years of the—
Senator Watt, please resume your seat. Order. Senator McGrath. Please continue, Senator Watt.
Thank you, President. Well, we've learned what really gets these people going. It's cutting wages and it's taking responsibility. They're the things that they get wound up about. So the party that sat by under a Prime Minister whose only famous quote was that he didn't hold a hose now want to come and talk to us about taking responsibility? Over the entire 3 years or 4 years that Scott Morrison was the Prime Minister of this country, there's only one thing he took responsibility for, and you know what it was? It was keeping wages low. That's what he took responsibility for, because that was a deliberate design feature of your economic policy. That's taking responsibility, keeping wages low. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to get wages moving again, and we're going to lift productivity while we're at it.
Your time has expired. Senator Thorpe. Order. 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 I have Senator Thorpe on her feet, waiting to ask a question. She has the right to be heard in silence. Please continue, Senator Thorpe.
Thank you, President. In recent weeks, there have been numerous—
Senator Thorpe, it's customary to start with who your question is to.
Oh, of course it is. I got sidetracked. My question is to Minister representing the Minister for Youth, Senator Watt. In recent weeks, there have been numerous violent attacks against young First Nations people in this country. Our communities are scared. Our children are feeling unsafe. There has been little or no response by state, territory and federal governments. Why is addressing racial violence not a priority for this government?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Thorpe. I don't think it's fair for Senator Thorpe to suggest that this government doesn't take these issues seriously. I would like to think that every member of this chamber has been appalled by some of the racial violence and alleged murder, bearing in mind that there's a court process yet to be gone through, particularly in relation to the incident in Perth, which was— it was awful. There's no other word for it, and it shouldn't be happening in Australia. It shouldn't have happened in Australia at any period of our history, and it certainly shouldn't be happening now. But it's not just me who's been saying this on behalf of the government. I well remember the multiple comments that the Prime Minister has made in recent weeks about these acts of racial violence. And as I say, I would hope that that is a position that is shared by all members of this chamber. I'm sure, Senator Thorpe, you are aware of a range of actions that this government is taking around matters involving youth justice, which disturbingly, again in this day and age, continue to have disproportionate involvement of young First Nations people than they should. As a country, we haven't done a good enough job around youth justice for young Indigenous people, and they are being incarcerated at a far higher rate than should be acceptable to any of us in this country. But I do believe that this is an issue that the government takes seriously. We had money in the most recent budget to expand a range of services around youth justice, particularly in relation to young First Nations people.
Oh, sorry, Senator Thorpe.
My question is, why is addressing, not hand on heart feeling, condolences and understanding how hard it is for us. But my question is actually, what is
Senator Thorpe, it's not appropriate
the government doing to address...
Senator Thorpe, it is not appropriate to repeat the question. You've made a point of order indicating to me that you believe the minister isn't being relevant. I don't agree with the point of order. The minister is being relevant, and I would ask him to continue.
Thanks, President. As I say, there were a range of programs that our government funded through the budget recently around youth justice programs for First Nations people.
Senator Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Thorpe.
This is not about youth justice. This is about racial violence. It's not about the black kids themselves.
Senator Thorpe,
it's about racists that are doing this.
Senator Thorpe, that's a debating point. You had a wide-ranging question. As I indicated to you on your previous point of order, the minister is being relevant. Please continue, Minister.
Well, I was coming to that, Senator Thorpe. In addition to the programs that we have in relation to youth justice, I think that there have been a number of figures from this government who've been very vocal about racial violence being completely unacceptable in our country, and I'm happy to take advice from the relevant ministers as to what we might be doing in that regard.
Senator Watt. Your time has expired. Senator Thorpe, first supplementary.
Thank you, President. If you claim this is important, which we keep hearing all the words and no action, then what is the government doing to ensure that First Nations children in so-called Australia are kept safe from these racially motivated attacks and are able to live out their birthright?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. As I was saying towards the end of my last answer, this government is doing a range of work in relation to racism and racist violence within our community. I'm aware, for instance, that the Human Rights Commission is doing some work in this regard that is being supported by our government, and there are a range of other departments within our government. I know it's not directly relevant to the point that you're making, but I know that the Department of Home Affairs is doing work in this space in relation to racism, particularly against migrant Australians. Again, I accept that it's a different point, but a similar issue about how we're tackling racism within the community. And that's something that we intend to do a lot more of, because we don't want to see First Nations people exposed to the kind of violence that we have seen of late. And all I can do is repeat the fact that I think we all found that disturbing, and we need to do much better as a country.
Senator Thorpe, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Given that you won't support raising the age of legal responsibility to 14 and showing that you're more focused on locking our kids up than keeping them safe, how are you addressing systemic racism in police forces and government agencies that impacts so heavily on First Nations children?
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. The matter that you began with, Senator Thorpe, about the criminal age of responsibility, the Attorney-General, Mr Dreyfus, has actually made that a standing item for discussion and action at the Ministerial Council of all Attorneys-General around the country. There are some states that are more willing than others to look at this issue and to do something about this issue, and I know the Northern Territory is currently doing something about that issue. But there are other states who aren't moving as quickly. But the fact that the Attorney-General has got this on the agenda every meeting of his colleagues demonstrates that that's something that we want to be doing. Well, Senator Thorpe, the age of criminal responsibility is a matter for states to determine, and we are demonstrating leadership by putting it on the agenda for every ministerial council meeting. That is how Commonwealth governments exercise leadership, is by putting it on the agenda to put pressure on the states to start thinking about these issues more.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Your time has expired. Senator Polley.
My question is to the Minister for Trade and Tourism, Senator Farrell. The government is making significant progress to diversify trade opportunities for the Australian businesses. Can the minister provide an update on the status of Australia's trade agreements with the United Kingdom and India?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. And can I thank Senator Polley once again for her deep interest in this subject area and a subject so important to her home state of Tasmania. And it's important to say, I think, that after a decade of the Liberal government, almost a decade of the Liberal government, Australia was more dependent than ever on a single market for our exports. To overcome this predicament, the Albanese Labor government is progressing a trade policy agenda that creates opportunities for Australian businesses to gain new market access into major markets. This includes implementing trade agreements with two of our major trading partners, India and the United Kingdom. The Liberal government dropped the ball by failing to conclude parliamentary processes to implement the Australia-UK Free Trade Agreement and the Australia-India Economic Cooperation and Trade Agreement. In contrast, this government took an important step yesterday, deepening and diversifying our trading relations with India and the United Kingdom by passing legislation to implement these trade agreements. We want to continue to work closely with the United Kingdom and the Indian governments, and I've been in contact with both of those governments overnight to ensure that all of the processes that we have started and commenced and completed yesterday, just waiting for royal assent. We want to ensure that not only is everything that we've done at our side to complete these processes done on the other side.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Polley, first supplementary.
A trade agreement with the European Union will further expand opportunities for Australian businesses, including at the agriculture sector. Can the minister provide an update on the progress of the trade negotiations with the EU?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Farrell.
At least I'm prepared to meet with them and discuss issues with them, which you never, ever did. And I met with them. I met with 8 of them last night.
Resume your seat. Order on my left. Order. 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 When there is quiet, I will ask the minister to continue his answer. Senator Hume. Senator Henderson, sorry, Senator Hume. There's so much noise, it's hard to tell. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Thank you for that protection. And I should start by thanking Senator Polley once again for that insightful question. Now, despite many years of negotiations, the Liberal government failed to land a trade deal with the European Union. Now, why was that? Why was that? Why did you fail to land an agreement? Why did New Zealand get ahead of us with a free trade agreement? Because of the former government, the Morrison government's disrespectful approach to a close ally. But I'm pleased to say negotiations are back on track, and discussions, of course, have occurred with the Prosecco producers, wonderful producers, both Australia and the EU.
Thank you, Minister Farrell. Your time has expired. Senator Polley, second supplementary.
President, the World Trade Organisation rules underpin global trade and trade agreements. I understand you met with the WTO Director General yesterday. Can you give the Senate an update on that engagement?
Thank you, Senator Polley. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. I thank Senator Polley once again for her question. Yes, yesterday, you're right, Senator Polley. I had a great meeting with the Director General yesterday. It was a very warm and friendly meeting. Of course, she's a great friend of our former Prime Minister Gillard, and her visit provided an opportunity to discuss how we can continue to work together to address the challenges facing the multilateral trading system. A key issue discussed was the need to ensure a properly functioning dispute settlement system. I also emphasised the importance of addressing trade-distorting agricultural subsidies. In recognition of the importance of the WTO to Australia's economic resilience, Australia committed $5 million to help developing countries and least developed countries access the benefits of WTO membership.
Your time has expired. Senator Hanson.
Is the Minister representing the Minister for Communications, Senator Watt. In 2018, Australia Post CEO Christine Holgate secured a deal with the CBA, NAB and Westpac to pay $20 million each every year as a representation fee for Bank Post to serve their customers. Will the Minister confirm this fee has been halved in the new agreement to $10 million a year each?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Hanson, for that question. I'll have to take the precise details of that question on notice. I don't have that information to hand, but I know that many Australians right around Australia, particularly in rural and regional areas, depend very heavily on Australia Post services, and that's something that we very much support. We've, for instance, stood very much against
Senator Rennick.
Senator Rennick gets a go. His
Rennick.
own side won't give him a go, so he's got to have a go during Senator Hanson's question. So what I was actually about to say prior to Senator Rennick's interjection was that Labor has always stood against the privatisation of Australia Post, for example. But the nature of Australia Post services is changing over the years. I know that they're increasingly moving towards parcel services rather than postage. But they do provide a vital service to rural and regional areas in particular, as well as servicing our cities increasingly with the parcel business that they have been operating. But Senator Hanson, I'm happy to come back to you on notice with the answer to your specific question as soon as I get those details.
Senator Hanson, first supplementary.
Yeah, thank you very much, because I appreciate that you don't know the answer to that, but I have been told on good advice that it is $10 million a year. Now, a lot of these these post offices actually rely on that money that they're making from that $20 million a year that was made them viable to actually keep their doors open. So the banks are making billions of dollars profit a year. If this is the case, if they have actually dropped it to $10 million a year, what will your government do to address this?
Thank you, Senator Hanson. Minister Watt.
Thank you again, Senator Hanson. Obviously, a number of these types of matters are ultimately decisions for the board of Australia Post rather than the government of the day, because it does have a degree of independence. However, we are concerned about the number of outlets that are available, particularly in rural and regional areas. And I know this is an issue that you've taken up in the past on Senator Hanson. Currently, Australia Post, for instance, has about 4,300 retail outlets across the country, and it has a legislated requirement to maintain at least 4,000 retail outlets. And as I was saying, I recognise, and I think everyone in our government recognises, that these post offices play a key role in communities around Australia. And as I've already reflected, this is particularly true in regional Australia, where often you find that it's the Australia Post outlets that also serve as the banks and a range of even of government services as well. So I know that these are issues.
Senator Watt, your time has expired. Senator Hanson, second supplementary.
Thank you very much. I don't know if you're aware of this, but since the beginning of 2021, more than 200 branches of the Big Four banks have closed or have been announced they are closing, mostly in regional areas, with customers shunted to bank at post outlets. What is your government going to do to counteract bank closures and lack of staffing happening across the country, mainly in rural and regional areas. So is the government actually going to start addressing this and pull the banks into line that they must provide the service that's necessary
Senator
to
Hanson.
Australians?
Your time has expired. Minister Watt.
Thanks, President, and thanks, Senator Hanson. I think we're probably straying outside the responsibilities I have as a representing minister, let alone as the minister. So, but I'll do my best to answer the question. Again, I am definitely concerned about the decreasing number of branches that we see in retail banks across country areas in Australia, and I guess I particularly now see that through my role as the Agriculture Minister. It was only last week that I was in rural, I'm pretty sure the conversation happened in South Australia, about the impacts of bank closures in those communities, and it places real pressure on those communities when they can't access those services. Actually, I remember now it was Moree I was having the conversation. So it is a problem. I think banks do have a community obligation to provide services to their customers, and as we see those banks withdraw, that does also put more pressure on Australia Post outlets, and that's, I know, what the fundamental point you're trying to make, but I'll come back to you with some more answers.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Brockman.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Employment and Workplace Relations, Senator Watt. I refer to the now Treasurer's comments on 21 November 2021, where the Treasurer said industry-wide bargaining was, and I quote, "not part of our policy." Given the government is trying to introduce industry-wide bargaining by stealth in its extreme industrial relations legislation, will the minister apologise to the Australian people for this broken promise?
Thank you, Senator Brockman. Minister.
Well, what do you know? It's 2:42 p.m. on a Wednesday, and we're on a broadcast day, and it's another false scare campaign about IR. Is this the third we've had so far? I've lost track just about how many we've had in question time today. So I'm not sure whether Senator Brockman knows that he is misleading people with what he's saying, but I'm here to help him. There is a distinction between industry-wide bargaining and multi-employer bargaining. Industry-wide bargaining involves a whole industry. Multi-employer bargaining involves multiple employers. They are different things. We are in favour of allowing employers and employees, where they choose, to pursue multi-employer bargaining. That is not the same as industry bargaining. It's in the name. So, again, it's just another false scare campaign from an opposition
Senator Watt,
that is...
please resume your seat. Senator McGrath, your constant interjections are disorderly, as are yours, Senator Cash. I would ask you to listen quietly. Minister, please continue.
I'm looking forward to the supplementary questions, because we might get to our fourth and fifth scare campaigns in one question time alone, because this one is yet another one that is completely baseless and completely misunderstands how industrial relations actually works in this country. So what we've got is a coalition that is so intent on running scare campaigns to stop wages rising that they are clutching at straws and making things up and misinterpreting how their own laws actually work in order to throw mud at a government that is trying to do something about wage rises. It's actually a little bit sad to watch from the coalition so completely misunderstand how industrial relations works that they will be making up these kinds of things, which anyone could just look at how those words operate. Industry-wide, multi-employer. They're actually kind of different concepts. You know what? Industry-wide is also different to single-interest bargaining, which is another thing that we're providing for. They are completely different concepts, and what you're talking about is not part of the government's agenda, never has been part of the government's agenda. The only agenda this government has is to get wages moving again.
Thank you, Senator Watt. Senator Brockman, first supplementary.
A survey of businesses by the WA Chamber of Commerce and Industry has found 9 in 10 businesses would be damaged by measures in the Albanese government's Extreme Industrial Relations Bill, and 4 in 5 would be damaged by multi-employer bargaining. Businesses are saying it will make it harder to run a business and employ Australians. It's not a scared campaign, they're scared. Why is the government turning its back on job creators in Western Australia?
Order. Before I call the minister, I'm going to ask senators on my left and right to be silent while the minister answers the question. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Brockman. Well, hold the front page. Big employer group opposes wage rises and opposes changes to the IR system that enable wage rises. I mean, has it ever been any different? Has it ever been any different? And we know that over the last 10 years, some of those big business groups were in cahoots with the coalition.
Please resume your seat. Order. Please continue, Senator Watt.
Thank you, President. No, so it's hardly a surprise that when we finally have a government in this country that wants to get wages moving again, that we see some business groups oppose it. But isn't it interesting that the opposition doesn't want to pay attention to those business groups that actually do support multi-employer bargaining? And as I was saying yesterday, in the Senate inquiry, we had evidence from the Executive Director of the Community Childcare Association, which represents over 750. Oh, apparently we're not prepared to listen to community childcare centres. They don't get a voice in this. No, they're no good because they represent employers of low-paid workers. They don't get a say.
In your seat. Senator McGrath, I called twice for you to be quiet and you just ignored it. The minister has the right to give his answer in silence. Please continue, Minister Watt. So, yeah,
apparently if you are a business that provides childcare services, that's not on it. You can't have your say. You also can't have a say if you're involved in manufacturing and installation associations who support
Senator
what we're trying to do.
Your time has expired. Senator Brockman, second supplementary.
The same survey has found the government's radical industrial relations legislation will put 34,000 workplaces at risk of employing fewer staff in the years ahead if the changes proceed. Employers universally are saying these changes will make it harder to run a business and employ Australians. Why is the government pursuing policy changes that will see less jobs for Australians and will see even more job losses than already expected under this government?
Thank you, Senator Brockman. Your time has expired. Senator Watt.
Thank you, President. Well, again, I am shocked. I am shocked that an employer group that is out there telling its members that the sky's going to fall in if these changes go through, then goes and surveys its members and their members are scared. What a shock. What a shock that is. Now, Senator Brockman is talking about our changes as being radical. So is it radical, Senator Brockman, that what we're trying to do is to make gender equity an objective of the Fair Work Act? Is it radical, Senator Brockman, that what we want to do is to ban secrecy?
Senator Watt, I would ask you to address your answers to the chair, and I would ask those on my left to be quiet. Senator Watt.
Thanks, President. President, I ask you, is it radical to have a government that wants to ban pay secrecy clauses in employment contracts? I think it's not. Is it radical that we have a government that wants to ensure employers have a duty to prevent sexual harassment? How radical that is. What a radical proposal to do something about sexual harassment. Is it radical to have a government that wants to make the sexual harassment dispute process fairer and more effective? How naughty and how radical of this government to want to do something about that? That's why we're doing it, to look after workers and look after businesses.
Thank you. Senator Waters. I've called Senator Waters.
Thanks, President. My question's to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change, Senator Wong. The CSIRO and the Bureau of Meteorology have today released the State of the Climate report, and unsurprisingly it finds that the climate systems that touch on every aspect of our lives and our environment are changing before our very eyes. Our country has already warmed by 1.47 degrees. Fires, floods and cyclones are more intense. Extracting and burning coal and gas is the biggest cause of the climate crisis. Minister, do you support Australia's coal and gas export industry expanding?
Thank you, Senator Waters. Minister Wong.
Well, again, I will first respond to the State of the Climate report and say, like Senator Waters and many, and I hope most people with who look at this issue rationally, and I'm afraid that doesn't include necessarily many opposite, it is a deeply concerning report. A report that's released every 2 years. It shows an increase in extreme heat events, intense heavy rainfall, longer fire seasons and sea level rise. It shows, as you said, that Australia's land climate has warmed by an average of 1.47 degrees since national records began in 1910. And I heard again interjections on the other side saying rubbish. This is the Bureau of Meteorology and the CSIRO, and
Senator
I know
Rennick.
you like to suggest they're part of some conspiracy, but this is what the science is telling us. This is what the science is telling us. But I'm actually quite pleased at the interjections, because it shows, reminds us yet again why the frame that Senator Waters has put to me is not the answer to what we have to deal with. It is not a single industry's fault. It is not a single employer's fault. It is not a single place's fault. We have to engineer a transition of the Australian economy and the global economy, and we have to do that together, and we have to do it from government. And for years we have been arguing for this, and I am pleased that we finally have a parliament in both chambers which does want to act on climate. And I also understand why it is that the Greens political party seeks to make this entirely about one issue. It is about transitioning the whole of the economy. It is about reducing the emissions that we produce, and it is part of doing what Minister Bowen did at the Conference of the Parties, which is being part of a global solution to what is a global problem. And no amount of finger-pointing domestically for political purposes will yield the outcome that we want.
Thank you, Minister Wong. Your time has expired. Senator Waters, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. I note that you conveniently didn't answer the aspect of the question about whether you support expanding the coal and gas export industry. However, I'll press on. Yesterday on Sky News, I'm informed the Managing Director of Tamboran, a company that this government voted to give $7.5 million to frack the Beetaloo Basin, that Managing Director said they'll be able to pump gas for hundreds of years. Minister, do you want Australia to be pumping gas for hundreds of years?
Minister Wong.
Thank you. Can I? I didn't see that interview, so I won't. I'm sorry. Okay, well that's good to know. Genuinely, we have what I will. We do agree on something. The position the government has been very clear about is that we will reduce our emissions by 43% by 2030, and we will aim to get to 82% renewables by 2030. What I would make this point is that the market is moving. The market is moving. It is moving domestically and it is moving internationally. And I know those opposite want to howl at the moon over this, but it is. And what that does show is that the reliance in the global energy markets on fossil fuels over time to 2050 will reduce. So whatever individual companies might
thank
say,
you, Minister. Your time
that
has
is the
expired.
reality.
Before I call Senator Waters, Senator Rennick, I have called you to order a number of times. This is Senator Waters' question, and I would ask you to give her the respect of listening to the answer. Senator Waters, second supplementary.
Thanks, President. That also conveniently avoided talking about the public money that this government uses to give to coal and gas industries. Minister, in August of 2019, you told ABC Insiders, in response to a question about Pacific Island concern on Australia's push for more coal and gas, you said that coal is an important industry for Australia. Is this still your view?
Minister Wong.
I think that anybody who has looked at the history of Australia and at Australia's current export profile will know the monetary value that coal has provided to all of us, and has funded a lot of the public infrastructure, including those things that you wish for, Medicare and so forth. But the point is, as the world moves to 2050, it is inevitable that we will have to ensure that we export goods and services into a global market that is a net zero market. And so that means we have to transition our economy to do much more for the new economies and the clean energy economy than we have in the past. So rather than just trying to make one industry and those who work in it, and vilify those who work in it, which is what the Greens political party do, what I want to do and what we want to do is transition our economy so our children get the chance to have the prosperity we have had, but on the basis of a clean energy and a net zero economy.
Senator Marielle Smith.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Emergency Management, Senator Watt. Minister, the Bureau of Meteorology and the CSIRO have today released their State of the Climate report, which states that the climate has warmed by 1.5 degrees from the start of the 20th century. Can the minister explain how this will impact on communities and the emergency management sector?
Once again, Senator Rennick, if you wish to make a contribution, there are many other opportunities during the week for you to do so. I would ask now that you stop interjecting. Minister Watt. Senator Wong.
Stand up and say it.
Senator Wong, order. Order. Senator Wong, I'm going to ask you to withdraw that comment.
It's defaming.
Senator Wong, I've asked you to withdraw that comment.
That he's a coward.
Senator Wong, it is not appropriate to repeat.
I withdraw.
Thank you. Senator Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Smith. I know that you're very concerned about what the flooding that we're beginning to see in South Australia, along with Senator Grogan, Senator Wong and Senator Farrell, and we're all very concerned about what might lie ahead for your state, and we'll certainly be there with you all. Today, the Minister for Science and Industry, Ed Husic, and the Minister for Environment and Water, Tanya Plibersek, released the State of the Climate Report 2022, and it is an extremely sobering read. This report, prepared by two of Australia's leading climate research agencies, the CSIRO and the Bureau of Meteorology, found changes to weather and climate extremes are happening.
I'll remind you there are opportunities during the week to make a contribution. Question time is not it. Senator Watt.
Thank you, President. And it is sad that even when we have a government that is serious about doing something about climate change and is in here talking about it, the Greens want to just carry on with their usual stunts. So this report does show that we are experiencing changes to weather and climate extremes that are happening at an increased pace across Australia. Australia's climate has warmed on average by 1.47 degrees since national records began in 1910, and the impacts are being experienced across the country. While Australia has always been known as a land of drought and flooding rain, the past 5 years have been beyond anything we've seen in our history. And this report shows an increase in extreme heat events, intense heavy rains, longer fire seasons and sea level rises. We've lurched from prolonged drought into the Black Summer bushfires and now the unfolding flood and storm situation that's impacting across Australia's southern and eastern states. The report found that continued increasing temperatures are leading to more heat extremes and fewer cold extremes. And what this means is an increase in the number of dangerous fire weather days and longer fire danger seasons across southern and eastern Australia. We can also expect to see more heat waves, and heat is already our most dangerous natural hazard, killing more people than all other hazards combined. And I want to acknowledge the work between the Bureau of Meteorology, emergency management agencies and the Departments of Health for the national implementation of the Australian warning system for heat.
Your time has expired. Senator Marielle Smith, a first supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, how is the government working to improve how we prepare communities ahead of and during these more intense heat, fire and flood events?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Smith. And this government is always going to be standing shoulder to shoulder with communities when disasters hit by providing the necessary support to help them respond and recover. But by better preparing for natural disasters, we can protect lives and livelihoods and lower damage bills from floods, fires and cyclones. Last night in this place, the legislation to create the Disaster Ready Fund was passed. That was an election commitment of the Albanese government, and now we've delivered. This fund was also confirmed in last month's budget, with up to $1 billion made available over the next 5 years for important disaster mitigation projects. We also know that the most effective way to assist Australians struggling with insurance costs is to better safeguard properties from the impacts of natural disasters. This fund will provide up to $200 million per year to invest in mitigation projects like flood levies, cyclone shelters, fire breaks and evacuation centres around Australia, funds that were previously locked away by the Coalition in their failed Emergency Response Fund. In the meantime, we're also helping Australians recover from the current floods,
Thank you, Senator Watt. Your time has expired. Senator Smith, second supplementary.
Thank you. Minister, please tell us, what could previous governments have done differently to have prevented these now extremely concerning global warming trends?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Smith. And before addressing that, I might just mention that since January, some 2.9 million people in Australia have accessed more than $3 billion in Australian government disaster recovery payments and $195 million provided through the Disaster Recovery Allowance program. But you ask, what could previous governments have done differently? Well, firstly, the coalition could have at any point over the past decade acknowledged that climate change was real. Instead, we saw 10 years of government-led climate wars. We're into the 11th year now, it would appear, that held our country back, exposed Australians to risk and made us an international disgrace. And with Senator Rennick and Senator Canavan still in the party room, still showing today they have learned absolutely nothing, that they still don't believe the science, we know that the coalition will still never come around on the basic science.
Senator Watt, please resume your seat. Order. Order. Senator Rennick, I'm sure I don't... Order. 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 Those on my right. I have a senator on his feet. Senator Rennick, I'll also remind you, you don't start your point of order until I call. Senator Rennick.
That was a personal reflection under section 193.3. Could he please retract that remark? Thank you. In the silence.
The mention of two senators, is that what you're referring to? It wasn't a personal reflection. Thank you, Senator Rennick. Minister Watt, please continue.
Thank you. And as I say, what we've heard even today from Senator Rennick and Senator Canavan among their colleagues shows that nothing has changed. There are so many things the former government could have done. It could have spent a single cent from its emergency response fund on just one disaster mitigation project instead of just earned interest.
Your time has expired. Minister Wong.
And I apologise for not hearing you previously, and I ask that further questions be placed on notice.